In Ecuador, citizens go to the polls in Sunday's general elections. Over 13.7 million are called to exercise their right to vote. Israeli troops began the withdrawal from the Netzarin corridor in northern Gaza as part of the agreement between Tel Aviv and the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas. And in Chile, authorities uphold the state of emergency due to wildfires as some 2,500 hectares have been burned down in the southern region. Hello, welcome from the south. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. This Sunday in Ecuador, the general elections continue in an air of tranquility. Over 13.7 million Ecuadorians are summoned to the polls to elect their next government until the year 2029. To have more details on how the day has moved on, let's welcome again our special envoy, Jorge Gestoso, for all the details. We're going live to Quito. Hello, Gestoso. Welcome back.
Luis, we're reaching halfway of this election day, and so far the turnout starts to be similar to the ones of previous elections. The participation of people are around 80%, as they did in elections in other years, 80% at the end of the day. But so far, so good in terms of everything is going smooth. There's no major incidents around the country. The two leading candidates, according to the polls, we're talking about Luisa González del Correísmo, the Revolución Ciudadana, has already voted in Manabí, is a northwest province of Ecuador, and also did the president candidate Daniel Noboa, and also has been issuing his vote the vice president candidate for Revolución Ciudadana, Diego Borja. Still, the big issue here is transparency. Everybody is following very closely this election act. They are talking about 500 observers, international observers, that are following very closely the development of this day. Also, the big issues still, according to many analysts, being unemployment or economy, insecurity, and also what they call it, the energy crisis. Definitely, there was a long drought here that made the sufficient amount of electricity not being enough. So this country has been living weeks of long blackouts, up to 14 hours a day, an issue that has been playing a role in this campaign. There's also an issue about how leveled was the field in this election, and there's also agreement that in the case of president candidate Daniel Noboa has benefiting from the resources of the state, the government, what is called the private media, the mostly television networks, and also the main newspapers in his favor. So we're going to see, according to the National Electoral Council, that according to what they say, 90 minutes after the closing of the polls at 5 p.m., scheduled at 5 p.m., we will be getting the first tendencies, and definitely before the end of the day, we will have a clear tendency, and there is mostly agreement that is highly likely, in emphasis, underline, highly likely to be a runoff on April between, supposedly, Luisa González and Daniel Noboa. We get back to you then, Luis.
Thank you, Gestoso, for the information. Of course, as always, we'll stay in touch to continue to have the latest details coming from Ecuador in this paramount electoral day. And with that purpose, to continue to analyze what is happening in Ecuador today, let's welcome the chair of the International Relations Department of the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Ecuador, Juan Carlos Valareso. Welcome, Juan Carlos, to From the South.
Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure, Juan Carlos. Very quick first question. What is at stake in this electoral process?
Well, that's a very broad question because I think many topics are at stake right now. The most important issues for society right now rank in the top security, environmental energy supply, and also the economy. Three big topics that, depending on the candidate, and mind you, we have a multi-party system. So out of 16 options, which in reality only two have a good chance of winning, we have the opposite situations pretty much. They both argue, Novoa and Gonzalez, about a tough stand on security, but at the same time, it is not clear how. And the same thing with energy supply. The country's lived through a bad patch of power cuts during last year, and again, it is not really that clear how is it that at a technical level they are proposing to do it.
Looking outwards from Ecuador, what impact can these elections have in geopolitics in the region and the world, especially in a context where we have seen a trend of right-wing governments being elected?
Well, I think what's happening in Ecuador right now is no different than what's happening in the world, right? The pendulum of the left and the right, taking control of governments. We know that 15, 20 years ago, it was the left wave that took over Latin America. And now it is a rightist wave that's coming back again. So what's happening here is a reflection of what's happening in the world. So I think depending on who wins, whether Noboa or Gonzalez, we'll see different alignments to the world system, right? We just saw how Noboa, before this election, he went to Donald Trump's presidential inauguration. And at the same time, Luisa Gonzalez and Revolución Ciudadana have made comments about their respect for Maduro's government when there's a big amount of criticism towards that as well. So I think depending on who wins, we'll see a shifting towards one or the other. At the same time, Ecuador being a small country and depending on the world's economy, I think regardless of who wins, we'll still see the same commercial trade patterns apply in the country.
Referring to the economy, both candidates have as you were saying, very opposite agendas. What is, in your opinion, what is necessary for the country to move out from this crisis in the economy that is experiencing with rising inflation and increasing poverty?
Mm-hmm. That's a very important point because I think none of the candidates, well, probably Gonzalez or Isa, have had a more socialist approach to the topic. And I don't mean necessarily the ideology itself, but more of talking about how putting forward policies about education and healthcare, and bringing the government back to the areas where international criminal organizations have taken over. I think it's one step closer to a development path. I think the candidates have to realize that they need to be more aware of the population's realities. And Ecuador, unfortunately, has had a skyrocketing poverty index. And we also have, every time more and more, the gap between the rich and poor keeps widening. So as long as we do something about that, as long as we implement policies that have to do with a very clear redistribution of the wealth, then I think we are on the right path to development. But as long as they don't want to do it or don't talk about it, then I find it very hard that we can come out of this.
Indigenous groups have historically played pivotal roles in Ecuadorian politics. Are their demands for environmental protections and social equity reflected in this election, and what role could they possibly play post the results?
Right. Well, as probably you and your audience know, in 2023, Ecuador became a landmark of progressivism in terms of environmental protection when we voted in a big majority to protect the Yasuní National Park, an area that has a lot of oil reserves, but that the majority of Ecuadorians decided to put forward the environmental rights rather than the exploitation of oil. With that in mind, I think it's very important that we keep in mind how Ecuador has the potential of leading debates and policies in environmental terms. I mean, we've expanded the protection area of the Galapagos Islands. We have the legal tools. Our constitution does give us the legal tools in order to protect the environment. It is just the political will that's needed. And as long as there is no will, then you can have the most progressive constitution, but nothing will happen. So I think the candidates should think about that, because Ecuador, I think, is, especially in generational terms, younger generations are much more aware of environmental protection, and they do want policies that protect their future. So I think candidates after this election, especially in the second ballot, if Noboa and Gonzalez get to the second ballot, they need to think about that. They really need to put forward proposals as to how to protect the environment.
One quick final question, Juan Carlos. In your opinion, what key developments should people monitor in the coming hours as the results unfold?
It's been said by both candidates, the leading candidates, that there may be tricky situations attacking each other, right? So I think at the moment, I just came back from my voting station and I didn't see anything suspicious. I think it's going to go pretty regular. But because of this polarization that I was referring to before, there is this expectancy created around the election, and the fact that they keep blaming each other as to whether there be fraud or any fraudulent actions. I think it's more rumor than actually, truth. We have a big variety of international observers throughout the country. So I think the elections are going to go pretty smooth. We just have to wait until 5 p.m. Ecuador's time to hear the results.
Thank you, Carlos, for your timing from the South and for all your opinions that you just delivered. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It was a pleasure. Let's continue with other news in Ecuador, as we were referring, talking about the general elections. The candidate for the Citizens Revolution Party, Luisa Gonzalez, exercised earlier her right to vote in these general elections. Gonzalez voted in the electoral center of the province of Manabi, accompanied by her followers and political team. During her presidential campaign, Citizens Revolution candidate criticized President Daniel Noboa's management of security, human rights, and energy, proposing reforms to reinforce the role of the state. Luisa Gonzalez said she would await the electoral results in the country's capital, Quito. And just minutes after the opening of the polling stations in Ecuador, the nation's current head of state and candidate, Daniel Noboa, exercised his right to vote. Noboa attended the polling station in the province of Santa Elena under the protection of police units. For the moment, he has not offered any statements about the general elections. And Ecuador's National Electoral Council announced that the process to select the country's president and representatives of the National Assembly is developing as expected. The CNE President Diana Atamain described the election day so far as a great success and highlighted the active participation of Ecuadorians in the polls. Atamain reiterated that the Electoral Council's commitment for the transparency in the electoral process and reassured that at the end of the day, the will of the Ecuadorian people would prevail. The official pointed out that vote counting will begin after polling stations close, starting first with the presidential votes, followed by those of the national and provincial assemblies and the Indian parliament. And the president of the National Electoral Council, Diana Atamain, reaffirmed the electoral authority's commitment with democracy and transparency.
Especial para todas nuestras tropas de infantería de marina,
Let's take a short break. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Israeli troops began on Sunday their withdrawal from the Netzarin corridor in northern Gaza as part of the agreement between Tel Aviv and the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas. According to Israel's public broadcaster, the withdrawal is expected to be completed by the end of the day, leaving the occupation army presence only in the Philadelphia axis and in the buffer zone between Gaza and its surroundings. The Netzarin corridor is considered a strategic zone as it divides Gaza between the north and the south. Israeli troops remain deployed on the borders of Gaza with Israel and Egypt pending the negotiation for a complete Israeli withdrawal from Palestine. And 7 Palestinians released on Saturday by the Zionist regime had to be hospitalized due to brutal treatments received in Israeli prisons. The information was confirmed by the Palestinian Red Crescent, which said that the 7 prisoners had been admitted to hospitals in Ramallah. The head of the Palestinian Prisoners Club, Abdullah al-Sagari, also confirmed that the prisoners needed medical care, treatment, and examinations as a result of the brutality they were subjected to during the past months. The Israeli regime released a total of 183 Palestinians in exchange for 3 Israeli captives released by Hamas as part of the 5th prisoner exchange in line with the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip. And Israeli occupation forces not only keep up with laying siege to the Palestinian population, but they are also advancing with ethnic cleansing in the occupied West Bank. The southern refugee camp of Al-Farah in Tuba City has been under siege for 8 days, in addition to the arrival of reinforcements. The occupation forces destroyed infrastructure, including the inhabitants' properties. Furthermore, the Israeli army arrested around 8 Palestinians after having hit their homes. Likewise, the Israeli regime expelled Saturday countless of family members from the camp. Afterwards, they found shelter in several schools. And in the occupied West Bank, over 20,000 Palestinians had been displaced from northern Jenin city as a result of destruction led by Israeli bombings. The governor of Jenin, Mansour al-Sadi, briefed that the occupation forces shattered to pieces the Jenin camp so that over 20,000 Palestinians were forced to leave behind their homes and personal belongings. Al-Sadi described the situation in Jenin as a collective punishment of the refugees, part of the ethnic cleansing. In addition, the deputy governor urged all international human rights and legal institutions to enter the camp and report the magnitude of crimes against humanity due to, in all likelihood, civilians being trapped on the rubble. And the United Nations assured that it is possible to rebuild about 70% of the Gaza Strip within a period of 5 to 10 years without displacing its population. The international body estimated that the cost of the reconstruction will be around $60 billion. In the context, the Palestinian Central Council reaffirmed its commitment to Palestinian national unity at all levels and rejected conspiracies aimed at destroying the Palestinian cause and its rights. The Council also rejected a recent statement by U.S. President Donald Trump about forcing a displacement in the Gaza Strip and legalizing Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. We now have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. Chilean authorities keep up with the state of emergency decree due to wildfires pose a threat as some 2,500 hectares had been burned down in the south of the region. Local officials report that around 15 of fire outbreaks remain active, which have been nurtured by high temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius. They further warned that forecasts estimated extreme temperatures will reach record numbers from Sunday through Monday, being the most critical days. State of emergency decree is enforced in central and southern regions of the country, and the measure includes curfews to allow authorities to deal with possible criminal acts. In this regard, the government assured that any person involved in setting the fires will be brought to justice and will be sentenced to 20 years in prison. And members of the PED Pincha Brazilian project released around 4,900 yellow spotted river baby turtles in the Igapo-Acu River, Amazonas state. The Rio Solimões Institutional Support Foundation and the Federal University of Amazonas have been leading the project for 26 years. With the partnership of Mineração Rio de Norte, its main goal is to preserve populations of chelonians by means of participatory management as local communities and institutions get involved. So far, the conservationist initiative has returned to nature over 5 million baby turtles of the Amazon, including 70,000 yellow-spotted river turtles who live in the Amazon River and the Orinoco River in Venezuela.
Isso faz parte de uma estratégia maior de manejo de base comunitária.
This is part of a larger community-based management strategy, where the community, realizing that the resource is threatened, whether by human encroachment or illegal capture, decides to take action to protect it. There are different ways to do this. One way is to protect the beach, when possible, allowing the nests to remain there. The community then records the number of nests and then the number of hatchlings that emerge.
Ali a comunidade faz o registro da quantidade de ninhos e depois da quantidade de filhotes que saem.
Meanwhile, in the United States, the families of the victims of fires in Los Angeles last January denounced errors in the emergency systems that exposed the fragility of the disaster response protocols. Last January, the fires that swept through Los Angeles area claimed the lives of at least 30 people and destroyed thousands of homes. Errors in the warning and evacuation systems delayed evacuation orders being issued. Evacuation warnings were sent in error to nearly 10 million homes, causing confusion among citizens, while others received no warning at all. Investigations continue, and affected communities face the challenge of rebuilding their homes. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.